In order to understand Islamic creation myths, first a term called acrophony needs to be looked at. It's a subject that is covered in detail in the book Islam the Honest Truth. Acrophony relates to the study of alphabets, in which the names of the letters are represented by a word beginning with that letter or with the sound that a letter represents. That is to say, the letters in the alphabet are not arbitrary, as their origins can be traced back in time to earlier writing forms. This was touched upon in part 10 of these video series, which showed how the Arabic alphabet is no different, because it was derived through Nabatean, which in turn came from Hebrew, Aramaic, going back to Phoenician, which in turn were based on the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs that represented a word. In this next short clip, Dr. Ahmad Al-lalaad, Professor of Arabic Studies at Ohio State University, explains this in the context of Arabic. The link to the full program is in the description.
This document is a leaf from a 7th century Quran, dated to 675 CE, the first Islamic century. It represents one of the earliest examples of writing Arabic in a calligraphic style. But when I look at it, I see in these archaic letter shapes the echoes of the alphabet at Sarabit. So for example, if you see this letter here, looks like a line with a small tail. This is the alif, the first letter, the A. Well, it originally looked a little like a bull, like this, and it gets stylized in Phoenician, simplified to simply this. Now the connection between that and our A in English is quite obvious. Now, one more step takes us to Nabatean Aramaic. Another simplification, it looks simply like a 6. And then in the Quran fragment that we looked at, we can see that the loop has almost completely disappeared, and we simply have this little tail. And in the modern Arabic script, a straight line. So that straight line through these stages goes all the way back to that bull, even though at different ends they look nothing alike. So the modern Arabic alphabet and the Latin alphabet that we use to write English are cousins. They belong to the same family. All the alphabets of Arabia, of the Mediterranean, of the Middle East, all of the alphabetic scripts seem to go back to one original prototype. It seems that the alphabet, the concept of writing each phoneme with a separate glyph, that idea, as simple as it is, was only invented once.
For the purpose of this video, in relation to the topic of understanding Islamic creation myths, the Arabic letter Nun will be looked at. Its English equivalent is the letter N, whose obvious connection can be seen in the Phoenician. Nun meant fish. As the Phoenicians derived their language from the ancient Egyptians, the letter was represented by a hieroglyph of a fish, namely an eel, which is a type of fish depicted here. The letter Nun is still used today in some very nefarious and malicious ways. Here are some pictures. Just as the Nazis branded Jewish homes and businesses during the Second World War, in an article below, it shows how some Christian homes have been branded today by Islamic extremists in some parts of the Middle East by using the letter Nun. It serves three main functions. Number one, as the letter means fish, it represents the Christian fish symbol. Number two, because it is the first letter of the Arabic word for Christians that the Quran uses, Nasara to mean Nazarenes. Finally, as a letter, it is useful as an expression of shorthand to convey a whole word or symbol without the need to write out a word in its entirety. The Quran still supports the idea that Noon means fish. In the Quran 2187, the letter Noon is spelt phonetically, with the pronunciation of the name of the letter remaining the same. It is in reference to Jonah, who was swallowed by the fish. The Quranic expression the Noon is translated as man of fish. The word Noon is also the Aramaic Syriac word for fish, a language that was derived from earlier languages such as Sumerian and Egyptian. For example, deriving from the word Noon, in ancient Egypt, the goddess of the waters was called Nu. Here is an example of a hieroglyph depicting her with the water symbols next to her. In modern times, the Arabic lingua franca for the word fish is samak, with the word hoot used specifically for whale. However, the Quran uses the word hoot for fish in general, including to mean whale. Although scientifically whales are not classified as fish, they are mammals. For example, in Quran 1863, the word hoot is used to mean a fish. In Quran 7163, about the Sabbath breakers, the same word is used in the plural to mean fish. As will be shown shortly, within Islamic sources, hoot has been translated as fish or whale. Islamic sources such as Corpus Quran confirms hoot means fish. The link is below. When the Quran uses the word hoot in reference to Jonah, it is often translated as whale. For example, for Quran 37, 139 to 142 in Quran.com, it reads, "Then the whale engulfed him." The purpose of describing the aforementioned is because within early Islamic creation myths, the fish is central to the earth's creation. It is a subject that is not known to many Muslims and is a source of embarrassment to those who do. For example, found in Tafsir Ibn Abbas, the link is provided below. A commentary ascribed to Ibn Abbas. There is a link below of an article by Islam Online where he is described by Muslims as the translator of the Quran and the ink of the nation. In Quran 68:1, it begins with the letter Noon, and he describes that the earth and the cosmos was created thus. Allah swears by the Noon, which is the whale that carries the earth on its back while in water, and beneath which is the bull, and under the bull is the rock, and under the rock is the dust, and none knows what is under the dust save Allah. The name of the whale is Liwash, and it is said its name is Luti Aya. The name of the bull is Bahamut, and some say its name is Talhut or Liona. The whale is in a sea called Adwad, and it is like a small bull in a huge sea. And it goes on. Ibn Abbas is not isolated in this regard. Pictured here is Tafsir al-Thalabi, another classical Sunni Quranic commentary by Muhammad al-Thalabi, who also confirms the fish carrying the heavens and the earth. In his commentary for Quran 68:1, he says, quote, "Noon is the whale that carries the earth, and it is the narration of Abu Zabyan. On the authority of Ibn Abbas, he said, the first thing that Allah created was the pen, and from it from that is creation. Then he rose and created the water, so he created the heavens from it. Then he created the Noon, so he spread the earth on the back of the Noon. So the Noon moved, so the earth moved. So it was established by the mountains for the mountains to provide stability on the earth." All the works just cited are considered to be amongst the oldest authorities in Quranic commentary and exegesis, with a fuller narrative on the Quran, biographical traditions, and hadith. Other classical scholars say the same. For example, Muhammad al-Kisai, who wrote a classical book on stories of the Prophet. An English translation of the book is shown here. It also concurs about the fish creation myth. For example, on page 8, it describes how Allah creates mountains called Qaf to give the earth stability. And on page 9 to 10, Allah creates the bull and the fish with the angel propping the earth up. Feel free to pause the video to read the pages. Even relatively later commentators writing in the 14th century, such as the popular commentary amongst mainstream Muslims, is the Quranic commentary of Ibn Kathir. On Quran 68:1, he includes the fish account in the original Arabic, but it is mysteriously omitted in the English translations. Nonetheless, after quoting Ibn Abbas and others such as At-Tabari, amongst other classical scholars, in his commentary he underlined in red a direct translation from the Arabic. He writes, "The first thing Allah created was the pen. He ordered it to write. It said, 'What shall I write?' He said, 'Write the fate of everything.' So it wrote what will happen from that day until the day of judgment. Then he created the noon. Then he raised the water and created the heavens with it, and laid the earth flat on the back of the noon. The noon moved, and so did the earth. So it was fixed down with mountains." In the aforementioned commentaries, it mentions how the earth was placed on a fish, and in the commentary by Ibn Kathir just shown how the earth was placed flat on the noon. The earth being flat is also confirmed by other Quranic commentaries, for example, Tafsir Jalalain. The link is below. In the commentary of Quran 88:20, it says, by quoting directly from the Quran, "And the earth how it was laid out flat," and thus infer from this the power of God, exalted be He, and His oneness. The commencing with the mention of camels is because they are closer in contact with it, the earth, than any other animal. As for his word sutihat, this word is translated as laid out flat. This on a literal reading suggests that the earth is flat, which is the opinion of most of the scholars of the revealed law. And it goes on. The fish creation myth is not just from within Islamic Sunni sources, but also found in reputable Shia sources such as Tafsir al-Qummi and Bihar al-Anwar, just to cite a few. It is even found in one of the most trustworthy Shia books called Al-Kafi. In volume 9, page 89, it says, quote, "I asked him about the earth, upon which does it stand forth? To which he replied, it stands forth upon a whale. I asked, upon which does the whale stand forth? To which he replied, upon water. I asked, upon which does water stand forth? To which he replied, upon a rock. I asked, upon which does the rock stand forth? To which he replied, upon a bull's smooth horn. I asked, upon which does the bull stand forth? To which he replied, upon the ground. I asked, upon which does the ground stand forth? To which he replied, what an idea! Therewith is lost the knowledge of the men of knowledge." According to another early Muslim scholar, such as Zakaria al-Qazwini, the name of the fish is Bahamut, whereas earlier Ibn Abbas said the bull is called Bahamut. Nonetheless, the fish is a sea monster, gigantic fish, a whale that lies deep below, underpinning the support structure that holds up the earth. Al-Qazwini described this by showing a disc-like earth with a surrounding range of Qaf Mountains resting on the back of a giant bull, which in turn stands on a vast fish held up by an angel. This type of visualization of the structure of the universe was not unusual during early Islam. Here is a picture taken from a book called The Wonders of Creation, published in the 16th century, that shows the image and its influence in early Islamic society. In the 1500s, Sururi translated Al-Qazwini's work. Here is a picture from a document found in Topkapi Palace Museum, Istanbul, Turkey. Again, in it is the fish carrying on its back the giant bull, and on the hyacinth slab stands an earth-bearing angel holding the sky and the earth, which is considered flat and surrounded by a series of mountains called Qaf that hold it in place like pegs. The beast that is described as Bahamut in the Muslim sources is taken from other non-Islamic sources, including from Judaic apocryphal sources. For example, the name Behemoth was already known. It is a mythological beast mentioned briefly in the book of Job. Other than a few allegorical verses, not much else is known about it. Within legends, however, it has been interpreted as a form of the primeval chaos monster created by God at the beginning of creation, and is paired with the other chaos monster, Leviathan. Leviathan was called Lutiaya by Ibn Abbas earlier. Leviathan is a sea serpent noted several times in the Old Testament. In Jewish apocryphas, such as the 2nd century BC Book of Enoch, Behemoth is described as the unconquerable male land monster living in an unseen part of a desert east of the Garden of Eden. Leviathan is a primeval female sea monster dwelling in the abyss. Here is a 13th century AD manuscript featuring the other great creature. In the most ancient section of the second book of Esdras, written around 100 AD, Behemoth and Leviathan are described as inhabiting the mountains and the seas respectively, after being separated from each other due to the sea's insufficiency to contain them both. In the Islamic creation myths, the purpose of mountains were constantly being referred to adding stability to the earth due to the movement of the fish. These mountains that give the earth stability are called Qaf. So here there is another Arabic letter that has a meaning. Quran commentators and early Muslim scholars indeed thought Qaf was the name of these vast mountains. For example, for Quran 50 verse 1, in Tafsir Ibn Abbas it says, and from his narration on the authority of Ibn Abbas, he said in the interpretation of Allah saying Qaf, it is an azure mountain overlooking this world, and the colour of the sky takes from it. Allah swore by it, and he swore by the glorious noble Quran. Although it's a topic for another video, there is something to be said about Allah needing to swear an oath by the fish, as he did earlier in Quran chapter 68, and in this chapter swearing by the mountains, and other of his creations throughout the Quran, or even by alphabet letters, a topic that is covered in the book Islam the Honest Truth. Nonetheless, there is a common theme from Islamic sources that mention mountains giving the earth stability due to the movement of the fish beneath it, a movement that can lead to some form of quake or tremble is not an idea that is ex nihilo. In fact, the Quran on multiple occasions confirms the purpose of mountains is to give the earth stability. Examples are provided from the following places: Quran 15:19, Quran 21:31, Quran 78:6-7, and Quran 79:32. Today, it is known that mountains are not stabilizers. Rather, mountains are the product of plate tectonics, a direct result from the instability in the Earth's crust. Earthquakes originate mainly from the edges of tectonic plates, including collisional mountain ranges and ocean trenches and ridges, which demonstrates that mountains do not stabilize the crust or the Earth. As early as the 1920s, scientists noted that earthquakes are concentrated in very specific and narrow zones on Earth. In 1954, French seismologist Roth published this map showing the concentration of earthquakes along the zones indicated by dots and cross-hatched areas. These areas were concentrated on or near mountainous regions, whether on dry land or in the oceans and seas. For example, a well-known mountain range is the Himalayan mountain range. It has some of the highest peaks on Earth, including the highest, Mount Everest. Rather than preventing earthquakes, this region is in fact closely associated with them. The collision of tectonic plates causes mountains to form, and this same collision also causes earthquakes, which explains the correlation of the two phenomena. The presence of mountains on any part of the Earth's surface thus often suggests the presence of precisely those underground geographical circumstances which generate earthquakes. The Qaf Mountains of Islamic creation mythology seems to be an idea taken from a version of Rupus Nigra, a phantom island believed to be a 33-mile wide black rock located at the magnetic North Pole or at the North Pole itself. Nonetheless, these ideas that later found itself within Islamic creation mythology were taken from various other earlier ancient mythologies, including from within Hindu mythology, where there is a turtle known as Akupara that holds up the earth. An example of a reference to the world turtle is found in Hindu literature. Here is an 1877 drawing of the world supported on the backs of 4 elephants, themselves resting on the back of a turtle. It was created by Oxford University's educated English anthropologist Sir Edward Bernard Tyler. He was the keeper of the Oxford Museum and the anthropological consultant on the first edition of the Oxford English Dictionary. Within Chinese mythology, Nua is the mother creator goddess of Chinese mythology. She is credited with creating humanity and repairing the Pillar of Heaven. According to mythology, Nua cuts the legs of the giant sea turtle and uses them to prop up the sky. Here is a picture by a famed Chinese landscape painter depicting Nua repairing the Pillar of Heaven. So in conclusion, Arabic is claimed by Muslims to be a sacred and pure language of Allah, the Quran, the Heaven and Muhammad, yet its origins can be traced to earlier ancient languages from pre-existing pagan peoples such as the Phoenicians, Sumerians and the Egyptians. Early Islamic creation myths contain accounts of the fish propping up the earth. Major Muslim scholars commentated and wrote about this, both from within Sunni and Shia sources. As these views no longer conform with modern science, later Muslims viewed these accounts as embarrassing and even omit them from later editions and translations. Many earlier ancient cultures, such as the Hindus and Chinese, had creation myths not too dissimilar. It is likely these ideas were introduced into Islamic sources in some form from earlier legends and apocryphas. The Islamic creation myths and the Quran describes mountains as stabilisers, whereas in reality they are the very opposite. They were formed when tectonic plates collided. Earthquakes originate mainly from the edges of tectonic plates, including collisional mountain ranges and ocean trenches and ridges, which demonstrates the mountains do not stabilize the crust or the earth. If this video was produced around 1,000 years ago, Muslims will be demanding evidence be provided that the earth was not created by Allah and put on the back of a great fish and bull. Thankfully, there is no need to prolong the video any further by providing such evidence contrary to these claims because of what is universally accepted today, all of which expose the absurdity of Islamic creation myths.